All right, so today I want you to go ahead and I want you to start with the activator. And in order to do that, I want you to use these two sets, so the 10 and 45 and 8 and 24 to find your greatest common factor. And then when you're done, we'll go over our objective and why this connects to our objective. So if you want to go ahead and pause this so you can find the greatest common factor of 10 and 45 and of 8 and 24. And in case you don't remember, a factor is a number that multiplies to give you those numbers. Find the biggest one they have in common.
Test 511 is now loading. 511 is now loading.
All right, so at this point, you should have already gone ahead and paused, and you're supposed to go over it. So, and I gave you a little hint, nudge, nudge. In order to find our greatest common factor, we have to figure out what numbers multiply to give me 10 and what numbers multiply to give me 45. Well, and I always start with my end caps. I know 1 and 10 multiply to give me 10. And then I know 2 and 5 multiply to give me 10. And then I work my way to the middle because now I can go, well, I know 3 doesn't multiply to give me 10, and I know 4 doesn't multiply to give me 10. And those are the only two numbers between 2 and 5, so I'm done in my middle. And I can do the same thing with 45. I know 1 and 45 multiply to give me 45. 2 doesn't. 3 doesn't. 4 doesn't. I know 5 and 9 multiplied to give me 45. 6 doesn't. 7 doesn't. And 8 doesn't. So I've met in the middle. If I wanted to, I could go ahead and move these closer because I left a lot of space in the middle. And then I am done. So now my next step is to go ahead, find the biggest number that they both share. Well, so let's see what they do share. This is the only 10. They both.
Natalie Reed, your ride is waiting. Natalie Reed, your ride is waiting.
All right. This is the only 45. They both share a 1. This is the only 2. They both share a 5. And this is the only 9. So their common factors are 1 and 5, but we want the greatest one. So their greatest common factor is going to be 5. And we can go ahead and do the same thing for 8 and 24. 8 and 24. I'm going to go ahead and do this, and I'm going to show you something. So I know 1 and 8, 2 and 4, and not 3. And we've met in the middle. All right, so then I know 1 and 24, 2 and 12, 3 and 8, and 4 and 6. So I can go ahead and say they both have a 1, they both have a 2, this is the only 3, they both have a 4, this is the only 6, they both have an 8, the only 12, and the only 24. So I can see the biggest number that I've circled from both sets is going to be an 8. And if you had me last year, you saw this. And if not, either your teacher showed you or you've never heard of this. But if you can look at those two numbers and you know that one of them, so in this case 8, is a factor of the other one, that is going to be your greatest common factor. All right, so that leads us into what we're going to talk about today. Our objective is that you can recall that information on finding the greatest common factor and use that knowledge in order to factor an expression. So how do we factor an expression? And again, these guided notes are on Schoology, and I have begun having you fill them out as we go through this so that I know that you are actually watching these videos, paying attention, and taking notes and learning what you need to. So though these are on Schoology, and where they are, there's also a place to submit a picture of them completed. If you do not have a printer, you can fill out the important note portions Otherwise, if you do have a printer, you can print this out and fill in as we go. All right, so in order to factor an expression, you have to, so separating an expression back into a product is called factoring. So 2x plus 8 is in the simplest form. We've combined all of our like terms. We've done all of our distribution. But then we can go ahead and pull out the factor. So your first step is to find that greatest common factor of each term. You are going to divide each term by the greatest common factor and leave the remaining factors in the parentheses. And you can check your work by distributing that factor out. So let's go ahead and do an example. So I have 7 and I have 7. I could go ahead and tell you 1 and 7 are the only numbers that multiply to give me 7. But because they're both 7, I know that 7 is going to be my greatest common factor. Because we right now are only worried about that number. So if 7 is my greatest common factor, I can divide this by 7. And I can divide this by 7. So I'm going to say 7 because I'm pulled out a factor out of both of them. So 7 by 7 divided by 7 is 1. So you can put 1x or just x plus 7 divided by 7 again is 1. So this should be our factor form. Let's go back and check it. 7 times 1 is going to give me 7. Keep our x. And then again, 7 times 1 is 7. So when I multiply it back out, I get 7 times 7, which is what I started with, so I know that I've done it right. All right, so we're going to go ahead and do number 3. So I have 5 and I have 15. So again, we're going to go ahead and we're going to make our greatest common factor table. So I know 1 and 5 multiply to give me 5, and I know 1 and 15, and then 3 and 5 multiply to give me 15. So looking at those two, I know that 5 multiplies to give me both of these, and they both share 1. So I know that 5 is going to be my greatest common factor, or you could also have done like I said earlier, where we know 5 is a factor of 15. So I didn't even have to go and make my point. I know that because 5 is a factor of 15, it's going to be my greatest common factor. All right. So I pull out factor 5 from both of these. So I know that I pulled out 5. I'm going to make my parentheses. I'm going to leave my minus. And then I'm going to pull it out my first term. Well, 5 divided by 5 is 1. And then I'll pull it out of my second term. Oh, and we're going to leave our m. Do not lose that. So 5m divided by 5 is 1m. Pull the 5 out and leave your minus. 15 divided by 5 is 3. And we can go back and check our work. I know that 5 times 1m is 5m because 5 times 5 is 5. And 5 times m, well, we don't know what m is, so we're going to leave it as 5m. We're going to leave that minus. And then 5 times 3 is 15. So we got what we started with, so we know that we did that right. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do 2. I am going to skip my factor table. Can you tell me why? That's right. I don't have to do a factor table for 4 and 20 because I know that 4 is a factor of 20. So I know that my greatest common factor for these two is going to be 4. So I'm going to divide both 4 by 4 and the 20 by 4. We're going to pull it out. We're going to set up our parentheses and say first term plus second term. Well, 4k divided by 4 is just 1k. And 20 divided by 4 is 4. And then we can go back and check it and see, well, 4 times 1k is just 4k. And then 4 times 5, bring our plus in the middle, is 20. And that is indeed what we started with. So again, we're finding that greatest common factor. We're dividing both terms by that greatest common factor of those two numbers. And then we've been checking our work by distributing. So look at 4. What is our greatest common factor? Did you have to make a factor table? No, you're right. We could have made a factor table, but I know that 6 is a factor of 48. So I'm just going to go ahead and leave it like that. So I know that I can take 6 out of both 6R and I can take 6 out of 48. So I'm going to go ahead and say 6, leave my parentheses. We're going to make this term 1 minus term 2 because we're not changing anything about it right now. We're just pulling out a factor of 6. So I know 6R divided by 6 is just 1R. And then I know 48S divided by 6 is going to be 48 divided by 6 is 8. Leave our S. So, and then if I wanted to go back and check it, I know 6 times 1R is 6. Bring down your minus, and 6 times 6R. And then 6 times AS is 48S. And that is the same thing as we started with, so we know we've done it right. All right, so now I've done 4 problems. I want you to go ahead. I want you to pause this and work through these 4 problems. And then unpause it when you're done, because in a second for me, but after you're done, because it'll be a little bit longer because you're going to work these out, I will go over them. All right, so at this point, you should have already gone ahead and paused it. If you haven't, go ahead and pause it now. Don't unpause it until you're done with these 4 problems. So let's go ahead and do 5 through 8. Did you make a factor table for 5? If you did, that's great. That's perfectly okay. If you did, what's the greatest common factor? If you didn't, what's the greatest common factor? Awesome. So either you made a table or you didn't. If you saw that 12 was a factor of 24, you didn't have to make a table. But if you didn't see that right off the bat, that's fine. So you made a table, you were going to get that 12 was the greatest common factor. If you didn't make a table, you're still going to get that. So I can go ahead and say that I'm going to pull out a factor of 12 from the first term and from the second term. So I'm going to pull out 12. I'm going to make my parentheses, set them up. Term 1 plus term 2. When I divide my first term by 12, I'm going to get 1W because 12 divided by 12 is just 1 and leave our W. And then 24 divided by 12 is just 2. And then if you multiplied it out, 12 times 1W is 12W, and 12 times 2 is 24. So I know I did it right. So did you get that right? Awesome. All right, so then we're going to go ahead and look at 6. Let's go ahead and make a factor table. I have 2, and I have 9. I know 1 and 2 multiply to give me 2. I know 1 and 9 multiply to give me 9. And 3 times 3. So our greatest common factor is 1. Because there is nothing that I can pull out of the both of those. So I'm going to leave it as 1 times 2p minus 9. Because there is nothing that I can pull out of the both of those. They both don't have p. They don't have a common factor except for 1. So we're going to leave that alone. Did you get that one? Awesome. All right, what can I pull out of both 4 and 10? Well, you made a factor table. You know 1, 2, and 4 multiplied to give me 4. 1, 2, 5, and 10 multiplied to give me 10. So 2 is going to be our greatest common factor. So we're going to say, I'm going to erase this table, but we know that 2 is our greatest common factor. So erase. Divide 2. Divide 2. And we've pulled out a factor of 2. All right, so 4n divided by 2. Well, 4 divided by 2 is solely 2. And we cannot pull out n. So we're going to leave it alone. And then 10 divided by 2 is 5. We left the form of that parentheses the same. Term 1 minus term 2. Pulled out our factor of 2. If we wanted to go back and check, 2 times 2n is 4n, and then 2 times that second term, bring down the minus. 2 times the second term is 10. Well, that's what we started with, so we know we did it right. And then again, one more time, I have 10, and I have 45. So 1 and 10, 2 and 5, and that's it. And then 1 and 45, 3 and 15. Think about that. Not 4, and then 5 and 9. Not 6, not 7, not 8. So I know I'm done. They do not share 45. They do not share 15. They do not share 9, but they do share 5. So I'm going to go ahead and say that I'm going to pull out a factor of 5. So I can say I pulled out 5. Here's my parentheses, term 1 plus term 2, because we're keeping that same form. 10v divided by 5. Well, 10 divided by 5 is 2. We'll keep our v. And then 45 divided by 5 is 9. If I wanted to go back and check, I can say 5 times 2v is 10v. 5 times 9, bring down your plus, is 45. So I've done it right. All right, I want to show you one example. So now I want you to think about how this works. You know how to do it. We worked through it, but can you see who's done it right? So it says a question on a quiz asks students to factor the expression 32m minus 24. Ryan and Jane's answers are given below. Who is correct and why? Well, before we go ahead and solve this, let's figure out what they got. So, well, actually, let's go ahead and factor it. So we know 32 and 24. So we're going to find our factors of 32 and 24. So 32 and 24, I know I have 1 and 32, 2 and 16, 4 and 8, not 6 and not 7. And then I have 1 and 24, 2 and 12, 3 and 8, and 4 and 6. So they do not share 32. They do not share 24. They do not share 12 or 16, but they do share 8. So they both share a factor of 8. So right off the bat, Jane is right. So we could go ahead and, so let's finish out the problem. So we know our factor is 8. 32 divided by 8 is 4, so 4m, bring down your minus. 24 divided by 8 is 3, so 4m minus 3. Well, we know that 4 times 8 is 32m. Bring down our minus. 4 times 6 is 24. We know 8 times 4 is 32m, and 8 times 3 is 24m. So when they both multiplied it out, they got the right factor, but Ryan did not pull out the greatest common factor. You can still pull more out of that. So we know that Jane is right because Ryan pulled out a factor of 4. They do share 4, but they also share 8, and 8 is bigger. So Jane is right because she pulled out the greatest common factor, and Ryan pulled out the smallest factor. So make sure you write in that Jane was right because she pulled out the larger factor, the largest factor, the greatest common factor, and Ryan just pulled out a low factor. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to show you one more thing. I'm going to do these two problems. We're going to do the exact same thing, but before we can factor, we have to simplify. So like we learned yesterday, we're going to distribute, combine our like terms, and then we will factor. So we know in order to distribute, I'm going to take this number on the outside, and I'm going to multiply it by my first term. So 5 times 3a gives me 15a. And then I'll bring down my minus, and 5 times that second term is 10. And we could have gone ahead and said plus a negative, minus 10 plus a negative 10. Either way, but I know that if we make it plus a negative, we're going to avoid some of that confusion we're having with our signs. Then our next step is to go ahead and combine our like terms. Positive 15 and negative 3 is going to give me a positive 2 because we're going to subtract and keep the larger sign. And then I have a negative 10 and a negative 2, so plus negative 12 because they are both negative. We can go ahead and add them, and they're going to make a bigger negative. Now I have no more like terms to combine. I have no more distribution. I can go ahead and say, well, what is my greatest common factor of 2 and 12? Well, I know 2 is a factor of 12, so I can pull 2 out of both of these. So 2, my parentheses, term 1 plus term 2, because we're going to leave it in the same format. 2a divided by 2, just 1a. Negative 12 divided by 2 is negative 6. If you wanted to go back and check, 2 times 1a is the 2a, and 2 times negative 6 is the negative 12, so I know I've done it right. Let's go ahead and do one more. Again, remember, this one seemed to throw us when I was doing our guided practice. If I have that negative next to it, it means I'm distributing a negative sign, which is the same as saying all of this times negative 1. So if you want to put a negative 1 there, I know negative 1 times 4k is negative 4k. And we'll make this plus a negative. Negative 1 times negative 17 is just positive 17. And then I'm going to go ahead and bring down my 1 plus 24k plus negative 4 plus 17. All right. So I have 24k and I have negative 4k, positive and a negative. We're going to subtract and keep the bigger sign. So I have 20k. And I have a positive 1 and a positive 17. So 20k plus 18. So now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to figure out my greatest common factor. So I have 20 and I have 18. 1 and 20. 2 and 10. Not 3. 4 and 5. All right. 1 and 18. 2 and 9. 3 and 6. And not 4 or 5. All right, so they do not share 18. They do not share 20. They do not share 10 or 9 or 5 or 6 or 3 or 4, but they do share 2. All right, so I can pull a factor of 2 out of both of those. And I know that 20 divided by 2 is 10. Leave our k. And 18, bring down our plus, 18 divided by 2 is 9. Those two share no factors except for 1, so I know that I went big enough. So I am done. All right. So I want you to go ahead and do these two. So go ahead, do your distributing, because that's what we learned yesterday, to simplify, distribute, combine like terms. I want you to distribute and combine like terms like we did yesterday, and then factor the answer. So by now, you should be paused. If you're not paused, go ahead and pause, because in about a second, I'm going to go ahead and unpause myself. You've had plenty of time to pause. All right, so you should have had time to pause. You should be now unpausing and checking your answers. What did you do first? Distribute. I'm going to write down your steps. So you have one where you can see everything you did. So 1, you distributed. And remember, we'll make this plus a negative because we're distributing a negative 3 and not just a 3. So negative 3 times 1m is negative 3m. Negative 3 times 6n is negative 18n. We're going to bring down what we had already, 9m. I'm going to make this plus a negative, so plus negative 6n plus 3m. So I have negative 18n and negative 6n. Two negatives make a bigger negative. So 18 and 6 is going to give me negative 24n. And then I'm going to go ahead and do the same with my m's. 9 minus 3, because positive and negative, subtract, keep the bigger sign. 9 minus 3 is positive 6, because 9 minus 3 is 6, and positive 9 is bigger. All right, my last step is to go ahead and do a factor, figure out my greatest common factor. Well, 6 is a factor of 24, so I know that I'm going to pull out 6. Parentheses, factor 1 plus factor 2. Negative 24 divided by 6. Well, 24 divided by 6 is 4, and it's positive and negative, so I'm going to get negative 4. And then n. And then the same thing with 6m. 6 divided by 6 is 1, and then we're going to leave the m. All right? And then you'd go ahead, and here you were going to distribute a negative 1 again. So negative 1 times plus negative. Just so in case you avoid any sign issues. 16r plus 2s, I'm just bringing that down. So then negative 1 times 6r, so plus negative 6r, negative 1 times 8s, plus negative 8s, s plus 4r. So I have 16r, negative 6r, and 4r. 16r and negative 6r, we're going to subtract and keep the bigger sign. 16 minus 6 is 10. 16 is bigger, so positive 10r. And positive 10r and positive 4r are going to give me 14r. And then these are gone, and these are gone. And then I have positive 2s and negative 8s. Positive and a negative, we're going to subtract and keep the bigger sign. So I have 8 minus 2 is 6. Negative 8 is bigger, so plus negative 6s. Let's figure out what they both share. I have 1 and 14, 2 and 7, not 3, not 4, not 5, or 6. So we're done. And then I have 1 and 6 and 2 and 3s. The only thing that I see that they share is 1 and 2. So we're going to pull 2 out of both of those. So 2, bring out our parentheses, term 1 plus term 2. 14r divided by 2 is 7r, and then negative 6, and negative and a positive, it's going to be negative. Negative 6 divided by 2 is 3s. Then 2 times 7r is that 14r, and 2 times that negative 3s is negative 6s. So I know that I did it right. Awesome. So today we recalled how to find the greatest common factor. We used that knowledge and the distributing that we learned on Tuesday, the combining like terms that we learned on Monday, and the simplifying that we learned on Wednesday, which uses Monday and Tuesday, to find that to factor an expression. Because sometimes you'll have to simplify and then factor. And in order to simplify, we have to combine like terms and distribute. And we have to know how to find a greatest common factor in order to factor that expression. All right, so now you should be done with those guided notes. Do me a favor to prove that you were listening. The couple that we didn't do, draw a star on them so I know you went through this video and didn't just fill out the worksheet. I know which ones you watched because I know which ones I did. The ones that I posted but did not do in this video, draw a star on. All right. So if you're still having struggles with this, if you answered any of those questions and you don't know what you did wrong after I went back through them, go ahead, star them, bring them to the guided practice, and we will answer any questions. If you're still struggling, please come to the guided practice and we will work through some problems. Otherwise, go ahead and get that school day work done. If you have any assignments, get them in today or they will not go in. All right, guys, have a great day. Bye-bye.